Not soon been looking forward to now. Smartphones have become a rite of passage for young people, but behind the convenience and connectivity lie growing risks of addiction, mental health challenges and exposure to harmful content. Parents across South Africa are beginning to push back, forming communities of resistance and joining initiatives such as Smart Device Free Childhood SA. In studio with me are Lerato, Ntwampe and Farina from SFC-SA, here to unpack what's being done to protect our children in this digital age. Ladies, good afternoon. Thanks for coming onto the show.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us.
Lerato, let's start off with you. What is it that your organisation does, or is attempting to do?
Okay, so smartphone-free childhood is one of 32 chapters in the world globally, and essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower and connect parents to ensure that smartphone use is actually sort of regulated, and we're also trying to lobby government to ensure that we get laws in place and policy interventions to actually ensure that kids are actually protected online. At the moment there's so many online harms that exist that children unfortunately find themselves embedded to, and parents have to deal with those issues. We're talking about sextortion, we're talking about child sexual abuse material, cyberbullying, and essentially our organization is formed on pillars by American psychologist Jonathan Haidt, which he suggests that we need to have 4 norms, and the norms are delaying smartphones until high school, no social media for children under the age of 6, at least until kids are 16 years of age, phone-free schools, as well as ensuring that kids actually have a childhood where they can play without constantly just being on their phones and the pressures of parents to buy these phones.
Okay, how big is this challenge with smartphones and kids and the problems that we are speaking of?
Well, it's just become a slippery slope where we're seeing children ever younger getting access to smartphones, and the emphasis is on smartphones just because when a child gets a smartphone that becomes its 24/7 accessory, but it is obviously, we're looking at any device that can connect to the internet, so tablets or gaming devices. But a young child being connected through to the internet gives them a portal to a world that their brains are just not yet ready to deal with. And I think parents are unable to follow them. So many of our parents of this previous generation didn't realize where our kids were going, what they were doing. They were not able to follow them. And kids don't talk about what's going on online. They try to deal with it. They talk to each other. They don't always talk to parents. And so what the research is saying from the last 15 years, since the iPhone came into being and is able to host ever smarter apps like social media apps fueled by ever smarter algorithms.
Or other smartphones, I suppose.
Yes, is that the mental health trend is definitely declining. So rising anxiety, depression, self-harm and suicide, as well as many addictions, pornography, gambling and gaming addictions of this past generation of kids. So parents who are able to access this information, are able to come and join our movement, really have an opportunity to take more mindful decisions around when their children access tech and how they do that, and look at giving them the best chance at a very precious and very fleeting childhood.
So, Lerato, there are many parents that are watching right now, myself included, are thinking, is it going to cost me to be a part of this movement? What do I stand to gain? I mean, what are the skills or tips or advice that I'm getting from being a part of this movement? Okay,
so firstly there is what we call a parent pact. And essentially what you can do is you can go onto our website, www.sfc-SA.co.za, and essentially there what you're going to do is that you're going to sign up for a parent pact. You're going to find your school. There is a drop-down menu where you can actually find your school, and essentially what you're going to do is that you're going to obviously sign up your child, and essentially what the thing is that you're going to find another parent who's actually probably on the same boat as you, that you can able to have a pact. You start a pact, and once there's 2 parents, the pact is sort of formed, and essentially you and that parent agree that we're delaying our smartphones for our children, so that there's no pressure to say, but Kate has a smartphone, but I don't. But if as parents we have that pact to say, okay, we're agreeing that we're not going to give our children smartphones, we're going to organize play dates instead, so that they're able to play, and that in the classroom they're not found where they're saying, oh, but everyone in class has one. If me and you, Hugo, have children, and we decide that actually there's that pact, then the pact starts.
I like the idea of the pact, but Kate, the problem arises where my daughter, my son already has a smartphone, right? As do hundreds of thousands of kids in South Africa.
Yeah.
What happens in that instance?
Yeah, so this, I mean, what we're saying is, with all the research coming out in the last 18 months, is that we're in this position where what we knew then is suddenly not what we know now. And so it is very much not judgmental. We are supporting all parents in South Africa, where we have an opportunity to relook at decisions that we've made. If we're worried about having given our children already access to smart devices and to social media apps, is perhaps how we can reduce the usage of that, look at limitations on the time spent, put in controls and filters around that, to be checking in on our kids and checking up on their devices. So being a lot closer to our children as they go online. But of course, we are talking to the younger generation of parents who have an opportunity to learn. And my children are teenagers, so I've been through this already. I'm talking as a parent of older children. The parents of the young children coming through, they have a really great opportunity to learn from what's happened to this last generation, and to take more mindful, intentional decisions.
What's the conversation with the schools currently? Because if we go to schools, my daughter plays sports, so she's on a particular group because there's information that's being sent. There's all sorts of information that they receive from the school on WhatsApp groups or Telegram or any one of these platforms.
So we have a smartphone-free school register as well, where there are certain schools that have gone phone-free, especially during the academic day. But also we do actually currently have a phone-free school survey, where we're actually getting parents' opinion, and that's also on our website. So they get us, so that we have the information, so that when we do lobby government and we actually do, speak to policymakers, that we have evidence to actually suggest, a future where actually kids can be sort of protected online. And essentially, I think it is quite important that schools obviously take mind of this. We speak to quite a lot of schools on this, and obviously there are certain policies in place where, there are social media policies, there are smartphone-free policies, and also there's communications with the WhatsApp group, because I think you've seen, in the past, there's a lot of in the news where kids are, being sexually harassed by teachers, and these sort of communication chains need to change. We can't have, parents or teachers, for example, having that access to children in that way, because sometimes it may, cause, a lot of issues in terms of, sexual harassment, in terms of kids receiving, pictures that are inappropriate by teachers, sometimes being groomed by them. So I think it's also a bigger conversation that we also do need to have. But I think in our organization, we try to, give schools tools to be able to mitigate some of those risks.
Kate, I'm interested to know the sort of conversation you're having with government, because you're both lawyers, so I think lobbying is something that you're quite accustomed to. What we know, for instance, is that 10 billion has been pledged or is going into ECD, and part of what government is trying to do is ensure that more and more children, even starting at an early age, have access to technology. Now, you're lobbying for a slowdown, well, as far as smartphones are concerned. Walk us through that conversation.
Okay. So firstly, smartphone-free childhood is not an anti-tech movement. We're about a low-tech and slow-tech approach to childhood. And of course, over the last year or so, as worldwide parents have come together to try and delay smartphones until high school, obviously the question around what do I do when my school requires me to send an iPad, for example, to school in grade 3 or grade 4, and this device is now coming home. I don't want this. I don't know how to manage it, and my child is on iMessage now until all hours of the day. So we are very mindful about the need to address, obviously, the digital divide in our country, about the fact that tech has a role to play in education, but that it needs to be done mindfully and intentionally and with safeguards. So with the necessary firewalls, with the necessary mobile device management systems in place, these devices, if they're required by school, ideally should stay at school and should be under the duty of care of that school. If they do come home, then there has to be provision made for helping parents to manage and monitor and keep those devices safe, keep their children safe on the devices. So that is really the area we're playing at, is the very mindful, intentional and safeguarded use of EdTech in education.
What I haven't heard from you is government's reaction, or what that conversation with government is like at the moment.
I think, you know, it's quite an interesting one, because obviously there is that white paper of audiovisual, and it does sort of address a little bit, you know, especially when it speaks to media literacy, digital literacy. But I think, you know, we're going to, you know, issue comments as well, input into that white paper, because essentially, you know, they're trying to have legislation that doesn't really address the internet. I think they're looking at it through a broadcasting spectrum. So I think there's still a lot of engagement that we still need to do with regulators to ensure, you know, that we're on the same page. Obviously, we know that technology moves a lot faster than law does, and we're constantly trying to catch up. But I think with an organization like this, because we have the information, we have access to the schools, we have access to the children, it's an easier conversation to have. Obviously, we do consider the digital divide that does exist, and we do want people to have access to the internet, but we also need to ensure that children are kept safe, and that you know, they're not exposed to premature content at an early age. And I think we're seeing quite a lot of that, and we're seeing a lot of harm that's going on. And I think with the government is really trying to enforce a digital literacy, but I think you know, over and above that, we still do need to have legislation to ensure that we actually hold tech companies responsible and reliable, so that they answer to some of the harms that exist on their platform. So I think, you know, when parents take the lead, society and government will certainly definitely follow.
Okay, what's the most common question you're asked around this conversation, particularly by parents?
I think the most common question is, if I delay for my child, will my child be left out? Will my child be the only one that is not socially connected, that is not invited to parties, that's not part of social circles? And that's the impossible position that parents have been put in. If I'm the only one that delays for my child and nobody else does, then yes, my child is left out. But if I am part of a group that is looking at delaying, suddenly, you know, my child is no longer saying, I'm the only one that doesn't have Snapchat or TikTok. I'm the only child that doesn't have a smartphone. And suddenly you have, if you can get to 25% of parents in a school in a particular grade.
I thought you were going to say 25 years of age.
25 years. Well, that's actually the age at which our prefrontal cortex is apparently fully developed. So in fact, Brad Huddleston actually advocates for no smartphones before 25, now that you mention it, Hugo. So yeah, no social media before 16 actually doesn't seem so bad when you look at it in that context, yeah.
Fantastic. Ladies, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much for having us.
Interesting conversation with Lerato, Ntwampe and Kate Farina from SFC-SA, and that conversation around a smartphone-free life for young people, at least to a certain age. I'm sure a conversation that you all enjoyed. That's still to come on